Does everybody have this part of the sheet? Everybody got this sheet? This was what was handed out to you in church.
Henry,
Okay, well, I've lost my assistant. I don't know where she is.
she's talking to Mrs. Tolbert.
Oh,
Is that her?
there she is. Well, I'm going to get going on this, and but everyone can have a folder, and I think we have a copy of that sheet in the folder too. Okay, yeah. So there's a copy of the sheet in the folder. Let me explain to you how this is done. This is a Q&A. What happened is I've been doing this for 30 years. And, sometimes churches will say, well, could you come and talk about abortion? Could you come and talk about stem cell research? Could you talk about medical directives and so forth? And the problem that we always encountered was this group wanted to talk about one topic, and that group wanted to talk about another topic, so somebody was always frustrated. So what we did about 5 years ago is we created the sheet, and we changed the sheet. It's probably due to be updated again. But we changed the sheet to address all of the issues that I talk about. Now, I have to explain to you, first of all, I need to provide a correction. Even though I was thanked as Dr. Fleischman, I don't have my doctorate, which is kind of weird because I'm an adjunct professor at Concordia University, and I teach a master's level course in biotechnology. And I told in bioethics and biotechnology, part of the philosophy department. And I told them, I said, I don't have my doctorate, so I'm not going to be able to do it, and I'm too old, I'm not going to bother chasing a doctorate. No, we want you anyway, so I still serve there, but I just don't want to either take credit or take blame with a title that I have. So, okay, why don't you go ahead and start taking time? That too, I'm also adjunct professor at the seminary. So when I travel around, in fact, I got to be in Canada to do a thing. Looks like that's coming together. This is a sign-up sheet. Now, some of you are on our mailing list. But if you are not, go ahead and sign up. First of all, I want you to understand, we are not funded by the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. We're called a parasynotical agency, which means we have to worry about our own funding and everything like that. So you do get fundraising letters. If you don't like fundraising letters, one, don't whine to me about it. Two, throw them out. The thing is, but this is how we live. But you can also, when you sign up, you'll get the informational things. Like I just finished writing the text for Clearly Caring, what we call CCM. We have the last issue in there. The last 3 issues. But you would also get this in the mail. And then if you sign up and you have an email address, you would also get, once a week we send out an email just what's going on around the world. Diane actually puts that together for us. We are not your mother's pro-life organization. We started off dealing with abortion. We deal with things a lot more technical. I actually have most of my contact with pastors, with clergy, because they encounter these issues with their members and they don't know how to handle it. And so we have all sorts of ones. I just did one. You've heard of the case of microencephaly. Those are the children that were born with the smaller heads and so forth. I had a pastor down in Texas that encountered that, didn't know how to handle it. So we get those things come to us, and that's what we do. So we came up with the Q&A approach, because then you can ask anything you want. There is only one caveat that I have to say about it, and that is when we get into a discussion on end-of-life care, you are not permitted to ask me publicly about a decision you made for a loved one as to whether it was the right or wrong decision. Because I've had it where people have said to me, well, I had this or that happen and I told him to do this or that. Did I kill him? And sometimes the answer was yes. But how am I going to say that publicly? And I don't want to be in that predicament. You ask me privately, I'll tell you. I have no trouble with candor, so I'll tell you. But if you're really smart, you just use the name of the person next to you and say, I know somebody named John, who did, But so there's ways around it. Now, the last thing I'm going to tell you, and this is probably my only negative about being in Wisconsin Rapids, and that is you are north of Fond du Lac. This is north of Fond du Lac. Now, this is a true story. And for CLR, for years, we have determined that when you are north of Fond du Lac, nobody asks questions. And we found it because we've traveled, I've been doing this for 30 years. The moment we get north of a line of Fond du Lac, straight across the United States, including into Canada, nobody asks questions. And so I'm in Sarasota, I think it was Sarasota, Florida. Zephyr Hills, Florida. I'm in Zephyr Hills, Florida, on a Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. They'd asked me to speak about stem cell research. So, this is a retirement group, but there were about 40 people there. I got to the end, I asked if there were any questions. Not one question. And I said, wow, I don't usually get this unless I'm north of Fond du Lac. To a person, there were snowbirds from north of Fond du Lac. And I'm not joking, that's not an exaggeration. I've never had that happen. But so if you would just pass this on, if you don't want to sign it, you don't have to. Just pass it on. There's other sheets here too. Yes, sir.
Pastor, I have a question. How old are you? I don't mind candor either.
I am 61 years and 360 days.
Well, I God's blessings to you. God's blessings to you. God's blessings, dear Pastor. God's blessings to you.
I'll tell you this part. I have a grandson who is what we refer to as the birthday buddy, and that is he's exactly 50 years younger than I am and 1 week. So I always, okay. So I sent him an Amazon gift card, so I got Amazon, Danny, happy birthday. It just seems like, 11 years ago I can hardly do it and everything. It's 50 years ago this coming Friday, and I have to keep, and so and my daughter goes, I said that, it occurred to me after I sent it, they took him to the Brewer game on Friday night, and we had a branch meeting, a CLR branch meeting. So we couldn't be there. And so all of a sudden Kate sent me a picture of him, and I said, it just occurred to me, I just said he was 11 and he's 12, isn't he? And she goes, yeah, she said, I just told him you were getting old and forgetful. So when you dish it out, you get it back. So. All right, any questions? By the way, I'm fully prepared if you have no questions to take this wherever it goes. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
I guess I would enjoy the stem cell statements.
Okay, I think stem cells hold a lot of potential. We have a moral problem, an ethical problem, with embryonic stem cell research, which requires the destruction of an embryo in order to extract the cells that are used. I like adult stem cells. I like umbilical cord stem cells. I like induced pluripotent stem cells. IPS, they're called iPSCs, but they're made primarily from skin cells. I like those things, but quite honestly, for all the experimentation, all the potential that embryonic and iPSC cells have, the adult stem cells still continue to outperform. Now I know you're an ophthalmologist, right?
Correct.
Now in the area of ocular work, there has been some talk about embryonic stem cells having some success with macular degeneration. And I haven't read or haven't had a chance to read whether iPSC has stayed caught up with that, whether iPSC works or just the embryonic. But it still hasn't been codified as far as it definitely works. But it raises an interesting ethical dilemma, and that is, if it works, do you use it? Now you know how much fun we have in class when they do that. If it works, do you use it? But nobody's asked me that question yet, so we'll go on to any other questions.
I had read that the my brain just stopped.
Well, that's a different condition.
Is there any stem cell research into that? Anyway, no, the vaccinations for the diphtheria,
Rubella,
and all that other stuff were developed from embryos in the 60s. Is that true?
Yes.
And does that then pose a ethical dilemma for anyone getting?
And it may. When I've written on vaccinations, and those of you who've gotten our periodicals, you've seen that I've written on it before. Some people are troubled by it. I always go backwards and say, you got to ask yourself, why does it trouble you? Well, you're troubled by the unethical way in which it was developed, all right? And sometimes that's serious enough that you just say, you know, like for example, there is a bank in our area that I absolutely detest. I think that they were dishonest. I think that they were, and I just detest. And so for me, I have a problem dealing with it. Or I could use any other bank. Well, I make fun of all bankers, but that's part of it. But I mean, sometimes you develop, becomes a real problem. The flip side of it is this. If you decide that you will not do anything based upon its unethical attachments, you really won't do anything. That's the problem with the world of sin. And the best example I always use is, you know, this is a rhetorical question, so don't feel the need to answer. How many of you drive a car? Okay, you drive a car. Okay, the auto workers have got, you know, health insurance policy. Health insurance policy covers abortion. So in the process of buying the car, you know, a few cents, a couple of dollars, whatever it would be, has gone to pay for abortion coverage. So what do? You know, you can't get away from it. How many of you live in a house? You think that in the construction of your home that a contractor didn't take God's name in vain? If you've ever been around a construction site, chances are pretty good that that's happened. You know, it's just, these are the things that happen. I always tell people that if that is your issue, then I think you keep talking to the doctor about it. You see, part of it is the way you speak up for those who can't speak for themselves is you constantly remind the doctor, this is troubling for me, do you have an alternative? Even if the answer is no, you keep registering the complaint. You keep registering the complaint. And you keep doing it, and sooner or later, the doctors will say, you know, I'm having trouble. Patients are just saying, they don't, can we go with others? But sometimes the doctors are a problem because the doctors don't share your conviction. That's just training. But remember this, correct, rebuke, and encourage, which we're very good at. We're very good at correcting and rebuking, but it's the part with great patience and careful instruction. One of the things that I do, and I get questions like this a lot, you know, and that is, what do you do when your sister's daughter has said she's now gay and she's going to marry her girlfriend, and you know, I don't want to go to the wedding. I don't want to have them here for Christmas. All of these issues that now hit home. You know, it didn't before. Now all of a sudden it's real. You don't want to do this. Remember this: you and I are called upon to be witnesses to God's word. Is it easier to witness if you build a bridge, or is it easier to witness if you build a wall? It's always easier to witness if you build a bridge. Now, you may not like it. It may not be what you just think is deplorable. You think all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, you have no chance of offering correction. You have no chance of directing them into Scripture if you're going to be a jerk about it. You just have to keep that in mind. And it's hard. I do most of my witnessing on the airplane because I spend too much time on an airplane. And you know how the conversation goes? You know, finally you get in the air and, you know, they lean over and go, well, what brings you to Phoenix? You know, well, you know, and I try to answer, you know, because I wear basically 4 hats. You know, I'm a parish pastor, I'm head of CLR, I'm a college, university professor, and I'm adjunct at the seminary. So I try to, actually what I do is I look at what reading material they brought onto the plane. If it's a Harlequin romance, we're going to be, you know, I like the sun. No, I'm sorry. All of you who read Harlequin romance, I know I just insulted you. But that's, I mean, but a lot of times, you know, if they're reading, you know, Smithsonian Magazine, or if they're reading something like that, then we're gonna ramp the conversation up. But the point is that you are in tight quarters because they designed the plane so that your leg overlaps their leg, you know, and so you're in tight quarters. This is not where you, on a practical level, this is not where you want to start a fight. or an argument. You want to, but a lot of times, it'll go like this, and they'll say, I very rarely will I say I'm National Director of CLR. Another thing is that when I used to fly to Denver, I used to say, actually, we got a donor from a plane on a trip to Denver. I was sitting next to a couple, and what do you do? And I said, well, I started a home for single mothers in Denver in 1993, and I said, I'm just checking on them. We've since relocated it to Milwaukee. And, oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the long and short of it is, it turned out that they were Wells members and everything like that. And they've been very generous donors ever since, so. But the point is that a lot of times I will say, I work in the bioethics department at Concordia University. And, that has to be an armful. You've got all these issues today. And, of course, you don't know where they are yet. And I'll say, yeah, but usually you can count on, the media to give you some issue to talk about. Because something, they'll just, whatever. But I try to get them to lead with it. I'll try to get, and a lot of times they'll go, I just don't understand why we just can't be more accepting of people. And I said, well, and I always like to say, yeah, I agree. I think we should be more accepting. I said, I don't know what exactly maybe you mean about it, but, if you mean we shouldn't be mean, we shouldn't be hard, I'm 100% in agreement. I'm very much against bullying and all that kind of stuff. So you try to create a common ground. And then, as the conversation goes, they'll start spouting off a position that is consistent with Scripture. That's no problem. Don't let that rattle you. All you got to do is just say, and now why do you believe that? I have no objection. Everyone's got opinions, so why do you believe that? And they'll say, well, I just think we should all be. So it's just your opinion, right? It's so how do you handle the people on the other side who say it's their opinion to be against? I mean, if all you've got is your opinion, what better? I mean, how could we argue with the other people then? You never put yourself as the other person. Just say, how do you do it? Well, that's a good point. But a lot of times all you have to do is your basis of authority. But you do this in class, because even at Concordia University, which is a splendid university, not everybody is on the same page. So you just work with them where they're at. That's when we started New Beginnings, the Home for Mothers. That's the golden rule I teach staff, and that is you learn to start with where they're at, and that's hard. Why? Because you and I go to church, we support the church, we go to Bible class, we like our pastor, we're very much into religious things and so forth. So if we start people with where they are at, you're frustrated because they're not where you are at. So if you run out of questions, I'll expand on that. So. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I actually have a question. I had the opportunity of meeting people in a leadership role for years, where 3 women that worked for me come to me because they were pregnant. None of them were married. One was a college girl who drank too much and was raped, basically, date raped. And then one was in a long-term relationship, but she wasn't ready to have children. She was really focused on her career and what the expectations were. And the other one was married with children already, but they all thought that this was not going to suit them. And it was interesting because they wanted to talk to me because they wanted to make sure that their view was okay. So they had doubt. Women, regardless of what situation they're in, will, when you're pregnant, that does a lot of different things to your thoughts and your life. So one of them was not churched. 2 of them were not churched. One was fallen away from Catholicism. So basically I just told them, I said, well, responsibilities are hard, I didn't know exactly what to say as a Christian. I says, I can tell you that the church and the Bible will tell you that that's a sin. I says, I'm not going to tell you that because God didn't put me in charge to judge you, but here's how this is where I felt. I had already had that 14-year-old that was pregnant at 44 or something, and they didn't think he would be normal, and it was an option for me.
You're
but-
right.
Is it still up?
It's better than normal.
But do you think that the biggest challenge in what I did there is I just kind of like, I kind of set my religious aside, you know, and they felt very comfortable. We talked a long time. One of them had a miscarriage, 2 had children. One went away and she put up her baby for adoption. The other one, you know, the child became the pride of her life. But do you find that that's something that a lot of Christians who go to church and value that life deal with, is they want to correct people? Do you
Oh, yeah.
run into that? Because I felt that what I did is I just said, okay, God, help me out here. I'm certainly not a counselor, and I'm certainly not, I don't even think I'd call myself a good Christian, but if you let it to God, that's something I don't hear a lot about in our church body or any other, because it's almost like some sins are worse than other sins, if we think so.
Okay, this is my foray into
art.
It's beautiful.
the. I do this thing that I call 10 levels of sanctification, and because it's helped me illustrate to our staff at New Beginnings how to approach this, and I also use it to talk to people how to approach others. And that is, when you are baptized for level 1, we have almost a 0 level of expectation. A lot of times I'll tell the story when I preach on baptism, that in the pietistic movement, they used to put really cold water into the baptismal font, so that when you baptize the baby would scream or something, and they'd go, "Oh, the Holy Spirit," you know. But that was about all it was, you know. And but you don't have any expectation, you know. And then you start, and I don't remember all the steps. I have to bring out my notes. But the next step is what I call like kind of a forced or contrived sanctification. And this amounts to, you put the little toddler into the high chair and you reach over and you hold their hands together so that when you say the prayer that they do it, you know. And then they go kind of to the next level, and that is where you don't have to hold their hands together. But I still remember William, who's now, how old is William?
4th grade.
4th grade. So William's in 4th grade. But when he was a toddler, I still remember him. We were saying the prayer, and out of the corner of my eye, he had his hands like this, and he was rotating the plate around so that the moment we had amen, it was like, bam, that's what he wanted to eat first. But I mean, so again, it's kind of contrived sanctification, you know. And then they get into Sunday school, and Sunday school is of, well, really, nothing replaces good Christian training at home. But that next level is Sunday school, because Sunday school, they start putting the pieces together. You get the Bible stories and everything. If you've got really thoughtful teachers, you know, they connect the stories and everything. The kids come home, they start telling stories, and it starts reflecting in the way that their relationship, to the point where, as we keep going up the scale, have you ever gone out to eat and couldn't remember if you prayed? You know, and I used to always blame, when the kids were young, I used to always blame Pizza Hut, because Pizza Hut always took so long, you know. And so you go into Pizza Hut, we didn't have enough money to buy an appetizer, so you're in Pizza Hut, and you had to wait for pizza to come. So when pizza would come, you know, while you're waiting, you're just starving, because why? The whole time you're there, you're smelling pizza, you've got all this going on. Well, once the pizza comes, you just start in. I mean, you know, get it all divided out. We had all the kids, you know, get it all divided out and everything. And then all of a sudden, one of these little kids who were in Sunday school and everything said, "Did we pray, or aren't we going to pray?" or something like that. They're growing, they're maturing. So they keep going up, and they keep going up, and then you go into confirmation class. Now, full disclosure here. I've been serving at St. Paul here since Pastor Heine died in 2014, in February 2014. And I had grown not to hate confirmation class, but to hate the parents. Okay. No, I know that this sounds offensive, but the point is that the kids, I love the kids, but the parents, you know, the memory works too much, it's too hard. Why do we have to do this? You don't really need to be in church all the time. You know, all of these kinds of things and stuff like that. But when you're in confirmation class, what we are trying to do as pastors are trying to lay a solid foundation for the children. And of course, we also do something else that's really weird with confirmation class, and that is we have confirmation. And every pastor that I know of has sooner or later said in a confirmation class sermon, in a confirmation sermon, this is not graduation, right? Pay no attention to the fact that you're wearing a gown. Pay no attention to the fact that you get a certificate. Pay no attention to the fact that you get gifts. This is not graduation. You know, in other words, we always communicate the exact opposite of what we're doing. But that's a little problem we have with the way we do it. And I make the same mistake too. But so you've got this going on, and then maybe you make the decision to go to a area Lutheran high school and so forth. Do you have a Christian day school here?
We're in the room right now.
This is it, right here.
Right
Okay.
here. Yep.
What age levels do you have?
1 through 8.
1
This
through
is
8.
the
Okay.
teacher right here. Principal right here.
Okay, you're right.
She's still
Everything
smiling.
in one class.
Beginning of the
And our
year.
teacher's aide.
So what? But I mean but so when you get into high school, you make the decision. Statistics show that when you make the decision to go to an area Lutheran high school, that requires substantial commitment. I mean, it's expensive. Out here, it's boarding, right?
Oh, the bus ride to Wausau, Northland.
Oh, Northland.
Yep.
Okay, you can do bus ride. Okay, but it's still a substantial commitment, so forth. But everything. Well, then you get beyond that. My point is do you see how you're growing? All right, you're constantly growing. You become a little bit more mindful. Where I came up with the 10 levels of sanctification is I was doing a Bible class. I was speaking to a chapel at California Lutheran High School, and a junior in the high school said, my best friend, who lives across the street from me, told me yesterday she's going for an abortion on Tuesday, and this was Thursday, and she said, we're going shopping on Saturday, what do I tell her? And I said, well, I'm coming back tomorrow to do the classes, let me get back to you. And I sat in the hotel room and I came up with this 10 levels. And I said, the problem is that when you're a junior in high school, you're passionate about your Lord, you're like a level 7 or 8, you are. And of course, most of us lose a lot of weight running up and down the ladder, but the thing is that we're at like a level 7 or 8. And I said, tell me about your friend. They said, well, she started going to Sunday school. When it came time for confirmation class, she didn't want to go to confirmation class. And her parents said, well, dear, if you don't want to go to confirmation class, you don't have to. So she pretty much stopped at 6th grade. So at 6th grade, she stopped. Now, meanwhile, I said, so she stopped at 6th grade. You kept growing spiritually. You're now in 11th grade. So 5 years. The problem you have is in a 2-hour shopping trip, you're going to try to accomplish 5 years of spiritual growth. And I said, that's always the problem. And you have to remember that when they come into your office or they come next door for a cup of coffee and they've got this massive spiritual problem, that you're almost always on 2 different planes. By the way, this is also why you tend to attract friends who are members of your church or think just like you. Chances are, you're members of the conservative Lutheran church. We have trouble with conservative Lutherans who are members of our church who are not Packer fans. We have the chairman of my congregation's a Bear fan. The former chairman was a Bear fan, and now my associate pastor is a Lions fan. I just said this is truly a ministry to all people. But the point is that we joke about it, but can you imagine having the gay couple next door over for a cookout? Most of us can't. Can you imagine the people who curse and swear and living together outside of marriage and so forth? We just don't, because they're not our kind of people. But the reality is, that's where you need to be. Those are the people you need to communicate with. And so I finally, I always tell the 10 levels, and then people will say, well, what did you end up telling the girl? What do you do? What's the one thing you have? What is the one thing she has? She said it early on. My best friend. When it's a best friend, you have an entitlement that other people don't have. And the best friend, I told her, I said, this is what I would do if my best friend did this. If my best friend said this, I said to them, I will go with you to the doctor's appointments. I will go with you to tell your parents. You make the decision to keep the child, I will help you raise the child. I will, if you make the decision to place the child for adoption, I will go through that process with you. I am your best friend, I will be there for you. If you're going to decide to take the child's life, I can't go with you there. I'll be with you, I'll be there when you're done. Yeah, I'll still be there. But I said, that is wrong, and as your best friend, I want to make this plea to you. You trust me for all sorts of other things. Trust me in this. That's not the decision you want to make. And I said, but in the end, it's your decision. In other words, be a best friend. You're entitled to say things that nobody else can say to them, and so don't be afraid to say them. And I don't know what happened, by the way. That's the problem with my job is, you're here, and then next week you're there, and you just don't know where you are. I'm not even sure where I am now, so it doesn't. That's why I have to bring Diane along. She's always telling me. Because we're driving here, and I'm going, okay, now what town are we in again? So,
Is that your lovely daughter that's helping you?
that's my lovely daughter.
Okay.
She is virtually my right hand.
She doesn't usually tell
Pastor,
you where
just
you are.
a note from
Where'd you
online.
go? Yeah. I'm sorry.
A note from online, Pastor Fleischman, I just want to let you know that another way to support New Beginnings Home is via Amazon. We always shop using smile.amazon.com and designate our donations that way. It doesn't cost us anything, and anyone can shop that way.
Absolutely.
This is my plug, she says.
Yeah. And we do it with New Beginnings and with Christian Life Resources. You can do it, and I've been doing it. Actually, you can do it with your church. Because we do it at St. Paul in Slinger.
I did it last night, dear.
Letting you know.
Well, we'll
Talk about that in the car.
we'll talk about that. Okay, next question.
Finish your levels of sanctification.
Well,
You got up to 7 with confirmation.
okay, I'm trying to think. I can never remember the numbers exactly, but I know that the next
Well,
level, next level is that you become very involved in the church. Which, by the way, and I think this is to the credit of your pastor, but really all of you, I love the idea that you got one person doing sound, one person doing video. You got people everybody's doing something. You participate in making announcements. I think that's all great, but that's because you're growing. You want to be a player. You want to be part. This is God. You're slowly, it's sinking in. It doesn't happen overnight. It's sinking in. Jesus died for me. I mean, this is incredible. I got to do something. I can do something here. And these are the people, this is where I can screw up, right? These are the people who are my Christian family. I can mess up here. And yet learn, because when I'm out there, they're probably not going to be as forgiving, So you grow here, so you keep climbing up that level, and pretty soon you get put into positions of responsibility. You're serving on church councils, you're working with the school, you're head of a women's Bible study, you're doing all sorts of things, and then you reach number 10. You're dead. That's the only time you're going to be perfect. So, but it's a worthy.
I can do that.
It's a worthy goal. Just remember, you can't take action to make it happen. Yes, ma'am.
So where does the church stand on how they deal with addiction?
Addiction?
Since it's so it's so prevalent. I mean, I can read this, but I obviously didn't have time before the class. As far as we're being a national epidemic. So where's the church?
It's interesting because right now the high profile stuff is opioid addictions and that kind of stuff. There are all sorts of addictions, and they are very different. And this is actually learning this, working with people with different addictions, has helped me become less self-righteous, because you find that there are all sorts of addictions. People have all sorts of. Some people's addiction is not chemical but attitudinal. But I always remember, and your pastor had him as a professor. I don't know if Dr. Becker ever used to tell the story that the way Becker started off the story is he said God knew what he was doing when he sent me to a parish in Iowa. And he said, and not Nevada. And he said, I never had the temptation to run around with other women. I never had the temptation to drink, but I don't think I could have resisted the temptation to gamble. Now, this was the greatest theologian I ever knew. And out of all the weaknesses, that just is like less than zero. I mean, my mom and dad lived in Reno for 4 years, Reno, Nevada. And I've been to Reno a number of times to do conference papers. The Arizona, California district meets in Las Vegas for the things. I had to deliver their district paper, and I flew in, got to the hotel probably about 9:30, went to bed, got up about 6 in the morning, was at the church by 8, and was back on the airplane by 3:30 getting home. It's just not a problem for me, but for him, and everyone's different. And that's why it's the idea of great patience and careful instruction. I did in the story, and I changed some names, I changed some of the details to protect privacy. But I had the situation where a fellow had his child was in our preschool program, and he was a single father, and didn't know where the mother was. Nobody knew where the mother was, and he was actually he had been arrested, he had been in jail, come out, life was going well. I mean, this was a shocker for everybody, but it was a drug overdose. It just to say stop it just doesn't work. And the same thing too with alcoholism and substance abuse. You just can't turn it off. That's why it's interesting. I always like to point out to people that you're told to resist the devil and flee temptation. And a lot of people think I can resist temptation. But see, where's temptation start? It starts in here. Whereas the devil, he comes to the front door. In other words, the devil has to confront you. And so Scripture tells you, you resist the devil. You resist the devil. But temptation, you have to flee. So, whether it's drugs or alcohol or pornography or other women or whatever it is, you have to flee it. You have to put yourself into a circumstance. It's different. Plus, too, in my congregation, part of the reason that I was willing to help out St. Paul was because they had just a number of systemic issues going on. And administration's kind of my bag. I've always, my mantra, my non-biblical mantra, was kind of a paraphrase of something that I'm not even sure Einstein ever really said. But a sure sign of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And there's been no evidence that Einstein really said that. But it's a good statement. And a lot of people think, that they could just keep doing the same thing. I'm just going to resist. No, that doesn't work. If you could resist, you would have resisted. My brother, one of my 3 brothers, used to be in loan collections, and he is a thug with a capital T. He just is. And now he isn't. He runs his own printing company. But when he was doing loan collections, and we had started New Beginnings, I called him up and I said, Ken, I've got, a lot of these girls will come into New Beginnings and they'll have a mountain of debt, and I'll say to him, I said, so we're thinking of sitting down with them and saying, okay, you owe 7 people a lot of money, so we're just going to give each one, like $10 a month or something like that. And he goes, yeah, we like people like you. He says, what you don't understand about people who get that far in the debt is, he said, they don't know how to stay to a schedule, or they wouldn't be there. He said, they'll do that. And he said, what you usually do in loan collections is, he said, you got to go in and scare the daylights out of them so they pay you out, because they're not going to pay the other people. And actually, whether he knew it or not, he is talking about the problem with temptation. He's talking about the problem. If you thought you could do it, you would be doing it. You literally have to change. You have to change. And that's, the next issue coming out is called Transform. And I go from, what's the difference between conforming to the world and transforming? And they're really, even though they both have the word form, they're 2 very different words in the Greek. And so I talk about the difference of that. Okay. So I don't know if that adequately, but I just think you got to deal with it. It's, you got to learn to just start being merciful. I still wrestle with self-righteousness. I probably will till the day I die, but you got to be merciful.
And John Family is helping
Yes.
kind of.
Yeah. WLCFS. I know you do the CAT ministry here, or MAT ministry. But WLCFS, I'll put in a plug for them. They do a great job. They've had me come in to talk about some substance abuse issues. I've also talked about gender dysphoria, gender confusion issues. And we've talked about that. And I remain very impressed with how they run their ship now. So that's very good. So that was a non-paid public service announcement. All right, any other questions? What? Yes, sir.
Ladies first.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'll be brief. Kind of to the point with the addictions and such. I know a lot of the therapies and the help that people get is going to this sort of Eastern mystic, be mindful, do this, and you need to meditate more. It kind of puts it all on the patient. Are there any sort of services through that a person could refer someone where they're not going to come out a Buddhist?
No. Well, and that's what I like about WLC. But I'm going to give you an example of a non-substance addiction. But I had a woman sit down with me, and we met over in the food court at Mayfair Shopping Center to tell me that she's fallen out of love with her husband and was infatuated with her boss. And she said, it isn't. I said, well, has your husband done anything wrong? Has he been adulterous? Has he been? No, none of that. Just, love. And of course, I didn't say this in the sermon, but a lot of times, you got to remember that phileo love is emotional, agape love is commitment. So when somebody says to you, well, we just don't love each other like we used to, you really should kind of stone-face just go, okay.
Of course not.
I mean, emotion's a roller coaster. Go to Oprah or something. I don't know, whatever changes your feeling on it. But the point is that when you marry, you marry for Ephesians 5. It's commitment, And so when she sat down with me and she said, I said, well, have you been romantically involved in it? No, but you could see we're warming up to each other and everything like that. She goes, so what do you think I should do? I said, I think you and your husband should move to another town. And she go, well, that was like too much. I said, well, then you're not serious about wanting to get your life back in order. You have to run from it, because if you stay in the same town, you'll find each other, and that's the problem, and it really requires change. Any addiction, any temptation requires change. And of course, what do you get? Some of the addictions, gossip. I had a pastor friend of mine say that the most common sin in the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod is the 8th commandment. We're always talking against each other. Why? Because, after a while, you just, well, how much more are you going to say about the weather? And but it just kind of gets to that. And you got to be careful, you got to be alert to that. But that's hard. But sometimes somebody has to be brave enough to say, I'm just not comfortable talking about this anymore. You just have to. If you're a good friend, they'll get it, and you'll still stay good friends. My mom and dad, we built their house next door to us when we built our homes in 2000. And my mom is part of, it's funny because my mom is 80, my dad's 83. And we have a hen club, that's what I call it, at church. But it's all the widows. And they get together and they go around each other's house and they have, they all get together. And they invited my mom to be along, to which I asked my dad, does this bother you? I mean, it's kind of like, it's widows and they're getting her ready, But what's interesting is that my mom, I said to my mom, I said, what goes on at that club? And my mom is very, she just knows. And she said, we are very careful not to get into 8th commandment issues. We'll talk about the weather. We'll talk about, usually they talk about other shut-ins that might need help. What can we do? But she says, we never compare or anything like that. And I believe her because my mom's that way, because those of you, if you ever get to know my mom, she's a remarkable lady, and she's from the Netherlands, and she will, do you know my mom?
No, but I'm from the Netherlands.
Oh, are you? Yeah. You don't mess around. So.
It's true.
I had a friend tell me once, when I talked about that too, being in groups or standing around with people and gossiping, and she asked me, so what do you do in these situations? And we talked about it. She goes, well, I said, well, what do you do in these situations? She says, if you say something to like, we shouldn't be gossiping, she says, now you're judging. She said the best thing to do, and I kept this, I'll never forget it. She says you have two choices. You can change the subject or you can walk away, have an excuse to walk away. There you're letting them know you're not going to participate, but you're not judging them.
Yeah. I always remind people that it's not a compliment when somebody feels that they can gossip with you. And I get it too, so that means I got to keep working on taming my tongue. But it's just something you got to be careful of. Now, I believe if we're holding to your time schedule, that we should be done.
We should be just about this. If I answer a few more questions.
Well, if anyone's got a question, I'm willing to do it.
We are.
Dr. Miller.
We're trying to break this line.
Okay.
This invisible line, we're trying to break it. So go ahead, sir.
Obviously, your forte is evangelism. Can you give us some good principles on evangelism? You talked about trying to understand, the active listening, understand where you're starting until you develop a vector to where you want to
Are you
go.
talking about it individually or as a congregation?
Individually.
Individually. Okay, I'm going to tell you as a congregation. I was hoping you were going to make it easy for you.
You're a politician, sir. Question asked you.
Yeah, he's got done watching that whole here and the fine art of never answering a question. But actually, remember this: everything in your life should be about building a rapport. That's what it is, whether it's individually or as a congregation. There's things we do as a congregation that fight against it, and you don't realize it because we're all part of it. Now I travel around. I've been in hundreds of congregations, and I see things. Yours is better than most. But even the service, the moment you do something that's not on the screen, that everybody should know, that remember that's an obstacle. That's an obstacle to people who don't know. Another thing too is in the wells, our number one outreach tool is we'll bring a friend to church. There is no way that an unbeliever is going to come to your church. I'm sorry, that just doesn't happen. What they will do is if you hold a food bank, if you do things that help them with their body.
Trunk and treat.
What?
Trunk and treat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how you do it, and you expose them. Now, we sponsor the blood drives in Slinger. We do some of the blood drives. We have a big gymnasium, and we got air conditioned and all that kind of stuff. So what we just decided to do is we're moving it to the top level. Because downstairs, all you see is the sterile gymnasium. Now, on the upper level, it's our narthex, it's big, it's air conditioned. We just want people, because that's where we have our pamphlets, that kind of stuff. People will pick up and grab things. And Diane just told me this happened yesterday, we just installed 3 55-inch monitors, one by each of the 3 main entrances of the church. And of course, now the pressure's on me because I'm the one who said I would program them. And I've got most of that programming done. I just didn't think that they were going to be that quick. And we're gone this week, so that should be interesting. But you got it. You're always looking to build a rapport. Now, we tried to a little bit in our neighborhood. When we first built there, one of the realtor who pointed out the land to us lived kitty corner kind of from where we lived, and he committed suicide. And I just said, not on my watch, not while I'm here. So and of course, you know how it is in your neighborhood. A lot of times you don't know who your neighbors are. So we had a Christmas party at our house, and two of them, yeah. And
Not at the same time.
yeah, we did it a couple times in a row. And part of it is that, my hobby is landscaping and a little kind of remodeling and so forth. So, with our yard, I've got picket fences and arches and flower gardens and all that kind of stuff. And it was amazing how many people said, we always wondered what it looked like on the inside. And I had designed the house too. I was going to be an architect. So it's kind of what I call soft Victorian. We have a porch and it's very, very nice. And we passed some houses like that here, coming up here. And but the thing is it gave us a chance to get to know who the neighbors were. I think when you can do that, I say have a beer. I don't drink beer, but have a beer with people. We always, at our house, when we have a lot of events at our house. We have a picnic. We've had as many as 70 people at our house for picnics and stuff. But, you could, you do things. We have a deck. We have them over. You try to get to know people. And all of my meetings at church, my office is at home. All of my meetings, to the best of my ability, take place at my home. Now, you got to remember, they want me. How do I say this? I don't want to say they want me and I don't want them. That wouldn't be right. But I mean, they asked me to come in when Pastor Hein had died, and I have more than enough work to do with what I do. And, but what I do is like, we'll have a fellowship. We just had a fellowship committee meeting on doing things. That meeting's held in our living room. Why? Because people think differently than they do. You know, I'm trying to get them to remodel the, we call it the commons area. And I want to make it with round tables where you're mixing. They said, well, how do we look at the speaker? I said, put 4 monitors on the wall. That's how you do it. And
Half would be better.
yeah, stuff like this, you know. But I mean, you know, just looking at different ways. Why? Because the reality is this. If one of you have a spouse who's gotten into trouble or something like that, you're going to tell each other before you tell the pastor. And that's why you want to create that fellowship of believers. They work, they encourage each other, and then you become a permeating element into your community. So I don't know, I'm very big in that, and we've made some big strides since 2014 at St. Paul in that regard, because we've been members of the church since 1999, and we had one time thought about quitting because they weren't real friendly. And so who thought that it would end up the way it did? But
It's
but
amazing
we
how the
were.
Lord does that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, oh, I'll put you in charge.
Well, and you know, the part of the problem is I went to the church council, first church council meeting after Pastor Hine died. Started at 7:15 and ended at 11:15. And I told him, I said, okay, I said, I'm just going to tell you right now, I am not coming to the meeting anymore. I said, this has been the biggest waste of my time, and I'm very blunt, I just am. And I said, this is what we're going to do. I said, next month, we're going to meet, and we're going to, 90 minutes, hour and a half. You're allowed 2 continuing resolutions, 15 minutes each. After that, then we have to have another meeting. Secondly, we're only going to meet every other month. And thirdly, you have to have your oil reports in advance. And then, of course, they're like clutching their chest and everything. I said, for crying out loud, you're not getting anything accomplished here. And you think that by having more meetings, and we have accomplished more on that schedule than we did when they were meeting all the time. Why? What happens at the church council meetings? You talk building construction. You know, the furnace went out, you know. And you know what happens with that stuff? I'm picking on the men here, but you know why that is? Is because we have very little experience talking Jesus Christ. But we all have a lot of experience with the furnace going out, the toilet plugging up, the doorknobs falling off. And it seems like everybody, and because I was going to be an architect, I know quite a bit about construction. I get put on every building committee imaginable. And the problem is, if you got a 5-member building committee, you literally build the building 5 times before it's up, because everybody has to tell you every war story of every building committee on. You hold that same meeting, we're gonna evangelize the community, we're gonna start something new. It'll be the pastor doing all the talking, nobody will say a thing. And see, that's what you gotta change. That's the challenge that we have for ministry. So, amen. All right, is there anything else? Otherwise, thank you very much. It was fun coming up here. You're close enough, and we'll be able to hear the Packer game. We had a lot of trouble hearing the Packer game when we were driving from Lansing last week.
No, and the week before in Florida.
In Florida, we literally went to the hotel bar and said, they were playing the Miami Dolphins. They had 2 screens. Can you turn one of them to the Packers? No.
No. Oh.
So, Holiday Inn Express is going to hear about this.
I know.
Other than I haven't kept up with the yard.
But we really did.
Exactly, I'm still trying to work and do that.
By the time
Yeah, I haven't time to. So I have the neighbor girl doing some stuff, but I'm learning. That's learning to do.